selecting cells, we already talked about that, but what I really want to get to is selecting a range of cells, what we have here. And let me zoom in, zoom out so you can actually read that whole thing if you'd like. So when you're selecting a range of cells, the most intuitive way to do that is to click and drag. But there are other techniques you can do too. Some techniques that I actually kind of prefer. One technique is to hold the Shift key down while you navigate. So let me take a pause and let me go back a second. All of the keystrokes that we just talked about, just 10-15 seconds ago, when we were talking about how to move around within this data set, and I showed you the control arrow left, control arrow right. We talked about arrow left, arrow right. Terry mentioned the end arrow up, arrow down, those kinds of things. All of those movement keystrokes can be turned into selection keystrokes if you add the Shift key. So let me show you what I'm talking about. All right, let's say I wanted to select this data here. All right, I just clicked and dragged it. That was pretty easy. But it was easy because it's not very much data. It's 10 rows and 4 columns. It's really not a lot. If this were 50 rows and 150, well, sorry, let me do this the other way around. If there were 50 columns and 150,000 rows, then it would be a little bit more difficult. You would have a little bit harder time selecting that data. So, assuming the data is contiguous, which hopefully it will be if it isn't already, you can use the control arrow right to select all the way to the end, all the way to column D, if you hold down the Shift key when you do it. So basically it's control and Shift arrow right. Bam! I just selected all the way over. And then with another keystroke, just by tapping the down arrow, it goes all the way to the bottom. And the cool thing about this is it doesn't matter if it's 4 columns and 10 rows or 40 columns and 100 million fafillion rows. The Excel doesn't go to a million fafillion, it only goes to just over a million. But it goes for a long way, and you can select all of that data pretty quickly and easily by holding the control Shift arrow right, arrow down, or there are a few other ones that I'm going to show you too, but that one's my favorite, and I get really excited about that one because it's so liberating. You don't have to click and drag and scroll and scroll and scroll. And back in the olden days, and by olden days, back in the days of yore, what I mean is Office 2003. If you clicked and dragged and got to the bottom of the screen, you would drag for a little bit and all of a sudden it would go bzzz, and it would go down like 800 rows, and that was really obnoxious. So it was kind of a pain to select large data sets unless you were familiar with the keystrokes that we just talked about, namely holding down the Shift key while you select. Now, you can do much smaller selections as well. So if I hold the Shift key down and just press arrow left and right and arrow up and down, you can see that I'm in complete control over what I'm selecting, down to each individual column or row that I want to select. All right. So if you just need to select a couple of cells, hold the Shift key down, press the arrow key a couple of times, and you can select a small data range like that. Other selection techniques that work are, for example, if you hold the end key, or sorry, not the end key. The end key doesn't really work very well in Excel, but let's say I'm at the end of my row and I press the home key. Normally that would take me to column A in that same row. If I do the same thing while holding the Shift key, it selects. So not that that is a really terribly useful keystroke, but it kind of illustrates the idea that I'm getting after here, which is that if you know how to use the keyboard to select things, to move around, I should say, if you know how to use the keyboard to move around, you also know how to use the keyboard to select stuff. One more little interesting point, which is if I were to select all of this data using Control Shift arrow down, if I let go of the Control key and press arrow up, I can adjust my selection. So you're not stuck. All of the selection keystrokes work all of the time. So it's very liberating because you are in complete control of what you have selected. Okay, any questions so far?